Alright, hello everybody, and welcome back to part number 2 in my suggested balance changes on Tabletop Chronicle. We're going to do the neutral cards today, or at least half an hour's worth of neutrals. I don't think we'll get through them all, but yeah, probably should have done these to begin with. We've already done Ariane, that was the previous video, but I think it would just be best to start with the neutrals, since then you'll have more of a framework and it'll just be easier to imagine like how these changes to the sort of class cards will impact the game. But yes, here they are. We will put the Zola, the diamonds, on top of the pile there. And I think, well, last time we had the cards where my cursor is, but I think that was a little bit hard to see. So this time we'll have them right next to us, and then we can put them here instead. No changes to Zola, though, except for actually the Zola scales. So the card is identical, but you know, this thing that it gives you is different now. It rewards 8 gold, just like before, but what we got rid of was, oh, monkfish, the text that said deal 4 damage to yourself. And I did that because I just think the card was a bit underwhelming. You already don't get all of that gold in one go, right? You're getting it over 2 slots, so you're getting 12 gold over 2 slots, which is a bit like 6 gold per slot, and you're also taking 2 damage in each slot, and you have to kill a big old 6/11 creature. I don't know, just didn't feel really very good, at least when you compare it to something like Commander Ziliana, which gives you so much health, it's so much safer to kill. Yeah, I know you don't get as much gold, but like 7 gold in that single slot, and the 12 life is so much better than like the 6 gold average that you're getting from Zola. I think this being, you know, a really insane thing in old school RuneScape, it needs to at least be a bit good in Chronicle, which is just not at all. So there is that. A lot of these diamonds on the top have stayed exactly the same, including Zamorgel, Yelps, and not Virago, though. This is the big one. My change says lose the game, and obviously that's not what I want it to be changed to. I'm not suggesting that for one moment, but what I do want to emphasize, and I said it before in one of the previous videos, is that Virago just completely ruins what I feel is the character progression part of the game. In that AP mirror matchup where you want to both go to the final fight, this card is so key to winning because, I don't know, I said it just feels like you can do whatever you want for 5 chapters, because it doesn't matter what you do, providing you can get to the point where you can kill Virago and go into the final fight, because this thing influences that game so much that, like, the AP mirror matchup feels more about, can I draw Virago in time, and can I dodge discarding this with KGP Agent or his Scarface Pete, you know, getting rid of it or something like that. Because like, it just feels really sad to go into a match of Chronicle like that Raptor Mirror or something like that, knowing that the order you place your cards in on Chapter 1 and 2, and like all of those fancy plays you're doing, and all of the tiny small advantages you're trying to get, it just, all of those small things that make Chronicle really great to play are just completely nullified by this card. It feels like the character progression part of the game is almost pointless. So, I don't know what you'd change Virago to, but I just don't want it to be a weapon. So I wrote this on it for now to just kind of emphasize that point. Alright, before we move on to the other diamonds and the rest of the neutrals, which are the 140 cards below that, I suppose, let's talk about 6 new cards, actually, that are not in the game that I think really ought to be in the game, that the game is lacking. These represent effects that the game does not have and should have, I think. So we'll start with Tokta's Ketzil, which is perhaps more commonly known as the Obby Shield in actual RuneScape. And if Stamina Potion is Romley Weaklax and Nastroth combined, this would be Adamant Armor and Nastroth combined. Currently, the gold-based, gold-generating decks that want to buy stats, they just lack the tools that they need, I think. I think at least compared to AP decks, which not only have more cheat sort of ramp, in the form of Sergeant Slimetoes and Count Draenor, which actually, by the way, are being nerfed. Or, yeah, they're in here. I'll guess I'll talk about them when I actually get to it in this big old pile of cards, and I'll discuss the implications of that. But they still have really, really good ramp tools, right? The creature-based AP decks. So they have that going for them, but they also just have way more ways, way more variety, way more options to build their base attack with, and as a result they are just much stronger decks and much more consistent decks that don't have to, spend time generating gold to buy underwhelming cards. So I just think, this is a necessary thing. There is a card that gives you health and AP, there is a card that just gives you AP, and now this should be the card that gives you health and armor, right? Next up, we do have Warriors Guild, and I mentioned this before. I think there really ought to be a diamond card in the game that gives you base attack, right? There's a big old diamond abyssal whip There's Diamond other cards, right? There just isn't any Diamond AP gain support, and I think that was kind of lacking from the game. The idea was basically to make it quite similar to Venescula's Vampire Power, except originally I just wanted it to be, well, the Warriors Guild in RuneScape, to get in, you have to have a combined attack and strength total. Attack is basically accuracy and lets you wield weapons, and strength is, like, I guess, how powerful you can hit. So in Chronicle, I guess that would be your base attack, which is how powerful you can hit, and I suppose I'd represent attack by, just having a weapon, which is what I've done. I considered making it, like, instead of having that 2 base attack reward, the effect would just say, gain 3 base attack. But I really didn't like the idea of maybe a weapon gets destroyed, or Linza forces you down a base attack, and then this card doesn't resolve, but you still pay 12 gold. That really rubbed me the wrong way. So I think 2 base attack on it as a kind of strictly worse Amulet of Fury is absolutely fine, but if you do meet the conditions, you get that final base attack and 12 armor as well. I think I really like that about it. I think, as I mentioned for Tokta's Ketzil, the Obby Shield, Gold Gain decks just lack the AP tools if they want to go down that route, and this is the Diamond card that I think they need. Also makes Radimus kind of good, which I have no problems with. Fuck, Radimus is cool. Oh, I love that card. I appreciate it that a lot of people think it's really strong, and it is, but I don't know, come on, it's the campaign, right? Like, it's the only meaningful thing you actually get from that, and everyone can have access to it. I think Radimus is really cool, and I think gold-based AP decks, or just gold decks generally, just deserve that kind of tool. Everyone's so scared of good cards for some reason, but like every time, I don't know. Next up we have Starvation. Now, I didn't put this in because I absolutely necessarily super thought that Venescula needed a tool like this, but it does seem like she's lacking it, right? One of her themes is increasing her life total. She's like one of the few legends that can actually do that, and I don't even think this card's that good, but like, it's just not in the game. That kind of effect I felt really ought to have been. It's not totally needed like the other two are. It's the only card in here that I put just because it was interesting more than because I thought it would be like super needed. Blood Pact. I do think this is needed, as well as Gnomish Ingenuity. So, reduce the attack and health of all creatures in your deck by 1, and this one reduces the cost of all supports in your deck by 1. Now, during our playtesting, these are actually both terrible. They're really not that good. So we started playing as if they reduce the attack and health of all creatures in your hand and deck, and of course the same for the Gnomish Ingenuity as well. I think the reason they're not that good is because, you play it on Chapter 1, and that's the ideal time to play it, right? But then you just don't get any benefit from it until Chapter 2. And at that, it's only the 3 cards that you draw where it even benefits them. But I do think this kind of effect is needed in the game. I understand that the Jagex game engine probably doesn't support this right now, but especially for dungeoneering / drafting formats / like sealed that I mentioned in the previous video, which is where you get like 60 cards, and then you just build a deck of 30 out of those 60. This kind of thing is needed, because the only things we have are KGP Agent and Kaizaj for kind of getting off your feet. I felt the game was lacking ways to get off your feet, but obviously we can't print more cards with base attack on them like KGP Agent, so I think these kind of effects are pretty cool. I don't know why this is an action. That should probably be changed to not an action. I don't know why action's even a thing. By the way, we changed the Barricade. We'll get on that later. Barricade's now a spell. Barricade should have always been a spell. Like, it's the only action in the game. Like, what even is an action? I didn't make this card, Scouser did. By the way, shout out to Scouser, who did most of the cards, actually. He created most of the cards, found all the art, and put them all together, so big shout out to him. Thanks for that. Silver Merchant Erin. Now, this is an effect that I really would like. Add Enchanted Key to your hand. What is Enchanted Key? Well, it's in the token pile over here. So, Enchanted Key, extend the length of the game by 1 chapter. That's such a cool thing, right? Like, I don't even know what deck it's good in. The more I think about it, well, at first I thought it would go into like a control sort of win in the final fight style deck, but then I thought, well, surely you just want to get to the final fight as fast as possible, because actually, the sooner you do that, the sooner you win. I guess the only reason you'd extend the length of the game is because you don't have enough health and you need to sort of heal up. Or maybe you're an aggro deck and, you need to extend the length of the game and kill them. So, yeah, Enchanted Key. It's kind of hard to know what it would be good in. It also brings up the interesting discussion of mill decks. Musha created a mill deck, and against Ariane, or against Glenn's Ariane, more specifically, he was able to kind of get rid of all of Glenn's cards. Like, he'd have no cards left in his deck by Chapter 5, so he'd just do nothing on Chapter 5 because he had nothing to do. And also sometimes he'd manage to achieve that by Chapter 4, though that was significantly less likely. And in that mill deck, you could like run Silver AI Merchant Erin here, and then basically you get a whole extra chapter of you can play cards and your opponent can't, and hopefully that's where you build up the advantage and you can win the game as a result of that. The problem with the mill deck was that it was quite bad. It just didn't really have any meaningful cards in it. Like, if you want to win in the final fight, you need to build base attack. And if you're too busy, like, discarding their cards and stuff, you're not going to achieve that. And also, if you're too busy discarding their cards and, you know, making them draw loads of shit with balance elementals and trying to get rid of their entire deck, yeah, you can do that, but, like, you know, as I mentioned, won't work for the final fight, but also you're not going to do much damage to them, right? You're not going to be able to fit in scorpions and troll chuckers and stuff like that. So I do wonder. But it's interesting, because you can get rid of all of their cards, and then you get a whole extra chapter of efficiency over them, because you've got the enchanted key. By the way, you'd have to run a 35-card deck for all of this to work, which I also think is quite interesting. But, like, this is a mechanic that isn't in the game, and I thought it could have been. Now, the reason I didn't just, like, put enchanted key into the game is because it needs to be telegraphed. Your opponent needs to know that it might be coming, because if you just play, if the card wasn't Silver Merchant and it was just this key, you'd just play the key on Chapter 5, and then, oh lol, now suddenly we're not going to the final fight, we're actually going to Chapter 6, and then they've all set up for a final fight chapter, and then suddenly we're not in the final fight, and they're going to be really annoyed about that. So, they need to see you play the Silver Merchant, so they know you have the enchanted key, and they know that you could do that on Chapter 5. I think that's important. We also had to put draw a card on it, otherwise I just don't think it would be viable. But yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting effect that I would love to see in Chronicle more than anything else. That is all 6, though. Alright, back to the diamonds, I suppose. Next up, we have Tokash, which remains the same. Quite like Tokash, it's a fine card. Definitely a really good strike, but you always take 6 damage. I think it's the strike diamond, right? It's allowed to be good. Certification's pretty cool, unchanged. Royal of the Stout is unchanged. Redbeard Frank is unchanged. Radimus Circle is unchanged. Party Hat is unchanged. Most of the diamonds are unchanged, actually, but we'll get through them all in a moment, and we will see the neutrals. But Moena, however, is changed. I actually just, like, removed a lot of the stuff on it. It says add an unmodified copy of your next creature, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think it needs to say that. I just think well, obviously it should do that. Like, I think that's what it should do. But, like, it doesn't need to say it all. It could just say, add 2 copies of your next creature to your hand. Anyway, I've changed it to add 2 copies of your next creature. It still makes it aggressive. Just, original version of Moena is a bit slot inefficient. This one's kind of like draw 2, and you get to choose what card you're going to draw. So it's kind of like a draw engine, which is really nice. We playtested it as add 3 copies of your next creature to your hand. That was quite strong, though, so probably not doing that. It makes cards like, you know, original Haunted Soul really good. So we didn't do that. This one, though, is a bit underwhelming. All right. Lady Zay. So everyone will probably remember the original Lady Zay. We've changed it back, effectively. Except you now have to spend 2 pirates from your hand. I'm just going to come out and admit we have done 0 playtesting with this card, so I have no idea how good it would be. But this one is quite underwhelming. It doesn't do enough. At least with the old Lady Zay, it was really, really strong, but you could out-tank it with some decks, like Raptor. I think, though, the problem was that it was too focused on just managing to get the cannonballs and do damage at the same time, so those 2 things combined were really powerful about Lady Zay. The spend 2 pirates, because it's a ship and ships need a crew, like, slows the deck down a bit. You have to take out some of the damage cards, like Scorpion and Windsurge, maybe. I'm not sure which ones off the top of my head. I haven't actually built the deck that you'd have to take out. But you have to take out damage cards and replace them with pirates. And the previous, like, Lady Zay deck in Season 1 was not, like, didn't really run any pirates. So I don't necessarily think this would be overpowered, but I haven't done any playtesting, and I am a bit afraid of it because, you know, Lady Zay was the scourge of ladder back in the day. God, I miss those days. As much as I disliked Lady Zay, those were the days, man. Chronicle back then, oh baby. But yeah, the point is this Lady Zay is not that good. Alright. Kaizaj is unchanged, Kale is unchanged. I just want to point out the Ravenous Snail synergy again from last video. Maybe Kale's a bit strong. Well, it's not the fault of Kale, maybe my Ravenous Snail needs to be a 3/3. Full Darok. We increased the cost by 1. I think currently this card is just a bit too accessible to, like, every single deck, and it's a bit too accessible early on sometimes as well, I think. You know, creature decks, or creature AP decks more specifically, that actually really value this card, they can get it off without too much of a problem with gold off of Krasian Warrior and Ice Nile or something like that. It's really easy to come by the gold for a Full Darox. Now, in this patch, we'll get down to Krasian later, we have removed the gold from that card, and also from Ice Nile, which is in the Raptor set, which we'll get onto in perhaps another video. So maybe that is enough of a change that Full Darok will be just harder to use, but just generally, I think like a card that is a support card and has a gold cost should be like better in a deck where you primarily are just trying to gain gold. That's not to say though that creature decks can't run supports, because they can. They do generate some gold, and I think that's a really interesting part of the game where you like look at your very limited sort of purse and think, well, what can I buy with my money? And I think Darox is always a good thing there. Yeah, if it costs 3, it'd probably be fine. I really like Full Darox. I think it's a really cool, very well designed card. Very flavorful from RuneScape. But I do think its cost could do with increasing by 1. Death. No change. Definitely quite good. Definitely quite good in Ariane, in the Miracle deck more specifically. Quite expensive. And that's fine. Combos with Earthwave nicely. That's not going away from Miracle Ariane, by the way. Looking at you, Grief Linzer. Black Knight Titan. No change. I actually really think this card's quite good. In a lot of my strike decks, I choose to run this over Black Demon a lot of the time. So I'll run, for example, in the Dark Strike Ariane, 2 Rev Knights, a Black Knight Titan, Tokash, and that's all the strikes you need, I think. At least in that deck. And especially with Virago running around in current patch, it's just like, this was really quite good. You could use it in that final slot to put yourself at 1 base, and you do a nice bit of damage to them too. But being at 1 base made their Virago kind of suck. And if they did happen to get the weapon, you would then, like, smash them in the face with your Black Knight Titan, which was quite good. But yes, this was the counter to Virago, but that doesn't change the fact that, you know, the game came down to rolling dice on whether or not one of you could play these cards. I want the game to be more about character progression than dice rolling on the final chapter. Either way, though, Black Knight Titan, quite a nice card. Bill Rack sometimes rubs me the wrong way, but a fine card. Balance Elemental, looking forward to the Enchanted Key. Abyssal Whip. Can we please have a Warriors Guild? Alright, we made it to the neutrals. Well, I guess they're all neutral, but the ones that aren't diamonds, I suppose. Alright, first up, Watchtower Guard, which actually got a buff today by Jagex. It is now live in the game as this down here. A 5 attack, 3 health creature, which is what it's always been, that now rewards 3 armor and a 2/3 weapon as well. So up 1 armor and up 1 weapon durability, which is actually similar to the direction that I took it. I increased the armor as well, but I chose to increase the weapon attack by 1, but also reduces durability. The idea here was to keep the combined total, 3 + 1 is 4, the same as 2 + 2 is 4. I quite like the Jagex change, but I went with 3/1 because, you know, we already have Barbarian Warrior, which gives you a 2/3 weapon, and I thought, like, a 3/1 weapon's a bit different, but, like, it doesn't matter. 2/3 weapon's quite good too. 2/3 weapon's probably better than a 3/1 weapon anyway, so Watchtower Guard is now kind of like Barbarian Warrior, but gives you armor. 3 armor instead of gold, which is what the Barbarian Warrior gives you. So, nice change by Jagex, and I think the one I suggested is very similar. Unstable Concoction. I think at the time when they originally buffed this, well, the original buff was this card right here. This is the card that I would like to see in the game, and it's the original one they suggested. I think at the time, though, everyone was a bit scared of something like this because, you know, Barker Toad was really, really good, right? And no one wants to see another Barker Toad in the game, so I think the community lobbied it down to 7, and Jagex said, alright, we'll put it in as 7 damage. But I think after playing with it, I think we realise now that it's probably 9 is probably fine. At least that's what I think. So I guess it doesn't really matter too much, but I do think a 9 damage one would be better than a 7 damage one, though I suppose that's not a very interesting thing to say. Better for the game, I think, is a better way to phrase that. Yep. Undead Dragon, no change, except that it is now an undead and a dragon. I would like it to also be a dragon and interact with things like a normal dragon would. I think, like, that would be cool. I mean, it is quite literally an undead dragon, so that would make sense, right? Undead Cow, which I've increased the damage of by 1. I think just Undead Cow has always been very, like, just bad, obviously. I just look at it and think, well, what even is this? Like, Scorpion is just clearly just decisively better in every single way because it deals 3 damage to your rival and you don't take 3 damage, and it's also a smaller creature. So for Undead Cow to be like good and unique, I think it needs to do more damage, right? If this does 4 damage, suddenly it's like stronger than Scorpion, at least in the kind of face hunter style, I'm gonna smork you down ASAP and I don't care about my own life, you know, like one of those self-destructive Ring of Recoil, aggro snake, spank go 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 decks, you know, one of those. Like Undead Cow kind of makes sense in that. This new one does. I even toyed with the idea of deal 5 damage, but I didn't want to push the card too much, but I'd like it to be deal 5 damage, but maybe that would be too much. At any rate, it's still probably worse than Scorpion, but at least it's got a more clearly defined role. I also made it a beast, because why not? It's an undead and it's a cow. Like, it is literally an undead cow. Troll Chucker, no change. I think this is a perfectly fine card. Alright, next up we do have Toxic Blowpipe, and this is where things start to get really interesting, because actually today, Jagex did buff Toxic Blowpipe. It's now in the game as a 1 gold, so it's decreased by 1, and actually removes 4 health from your next creature instead of dealing 3. So that's increased by 1. The reward has remained the same, but the suggestion I made, I think clearly the card needs to do more, right? In both instances, the new Jagex one and in my one, it deals 4. But I actually went the other way. I thought, alright, now that we've buffed this card, we've made the effect stronger, we've made it more slot efficient, that was what I was thinking of doing. I thought now the cost needs to be moved up, but they've moved it down. They've made it 1. I guess mine does reward 1 extra life, but that doesn't explain a 2 gold discrepancy. I actually, now looking at the Jagex change, I'm thinking they're right. Like, it ought to really cost 1 gold, given the gold decks, you know, really do need pushing. I don't know why I made it cost 3. That's like completely the wrong direction for helping out gold decks. I would, though, however, like to point out that there's a whole bunch of reach cards in here that I've been very, very, very generous with, we could say, in perhaps Raptor, Frenzy in particular, and I'm looking forward to showing you that. But maybe that's why I wasn't so generous to Toxic Blowpipe. But yeah, I really like the Jagex change. I think that card definitely needs pushing, and the fact that it's now like a contender with old Count Draenor, or I guess nerfed Count Draenor, is really good. I'm really happy to see that. I'm really glad Jagex is okay with pushing cards. I think that card really did need pushing. I'm really, really glad to see it. Alright, next up we do have Tormented Demon, which I've been very harsh to. I said this in a previous video, that Tormented Demon was completely outrageous. The ramp it provides is absolutely insane. You can kill this thing with a Sergeant's Liontoes weapon, which has been nerfed now, so I guess you can't do that anymore. Crawling Hand, Bouncer, and you could even grab a 2-3 weapon and kill it. Yeah, you'd take a little bit of extra damage. Like, people even went into this on Roller the Stout. Like, the fact that you could even consider doing that as a good play is just absurd. Because you'd want to get that 4-2 weapon and that 1 base attack, take you up to 7 total attack, and then slam a Jad, right? Or, if not, like, 2-hit killer Dagannoth Sentinel, or actually, I guess that's not really the card people use anymore. I should say Ogre Warlord. That's the much more preferred card now. It's much less punishing. But, you know, the point stands. This is an insane AP tool, and I think is one of the biggest reasons gold game decks just can't compete, because, you know, this thing is nuts. And gold game decks don't really have all of the space to include tools like, well, I guess old Sergeant Slimetoes and Crawling Hand to kill this. They want to be generating gold and things. What I've done is made it aggressive. That's more of a flavor change. It doesn't have to be aggressive. I just think more cards in the neutral pool probably should be aggressive. It's a mechanic that I suppose is underutilized. I'd like to retrospectively add it to a few cards in the collection. I have also given it Exhaust to bring it in line with all of the other demons, and I've given it a 4-1 weapon as well. So yeah, quite the nerf, but honestly, I think it needs to be nerfed quite hard. This card is really, really good. And I appreciate that maybe you don't need to write Exhaust on it if you're giving it a 4-1 weapon, but I really do like both. I really want to just take this out of the realms of playability and just say, come on guys, move on, find a card that isn't ridiculous. Let's play a fair game of Chronicle that's actually fun. Like, the fact that people went Sergeant Slimetoes, Tormented Demon, Jad on Chapter 1, and I know it's not the greatest thing to do is to pick out 4-card combos, but, like, the fact that you could do that just was... it rubbed me the wrong way, to say the least. I really don't like how powerful this thing was. So my nerf was quite harsh, and I appreciate that. Alright, next up we have Toxzil, which is interesting because Jagex actually buffed this one today. So, well actually, I'm not sure if you can call it a buff, because overall not really much has changed. It's still a 2-5, and it still has remove 4 health from your next creature, which is always what it did. But what they did get rid of was the 2 armor reward and the claws remove 2 health. So, I guess overall it's no net change in life. So really, ultimately, the card hasn't changed. But given that Count Draenor has been nerfed by them, a lot of people are saying, oh, this is the new Count Draenor. I personally didn't come up with any changes. I think it was, like, it doesn't really matter or make that much difference, I suppose. Is it really a replacement for Count Draenor, though? Before you get to 5 base attack, yeah, it's definitely a replacement. It functions almost exactly the same as Count Draenor. The real difference will be that, you know, post 5 base attack, people use Count Draenor as just a 4-life heal. A lot of the time in Honest Raptor, I would just play Count Draenor into Rock Crab on something like Chapter 4 or 5 when I needed life. You steal all the life from the Rock Crab, and then you just heal up off the Rock Crab as well. Toxil just doesn't heal you, though. So, yes, this is a big change, right? Like, that's a whole card's worth of efficiency gone. If you consider Cabbage to be a card, then Toxil is worse than Count Draenor. I think that's obvious, though. No one's saying or disputing that. But I think everybody's might be forgetting about the healing. I don't think we should be too quick to forget that. Part of the reason that Count Draenor was so good was because the early game, it was a reach tool, and late game, it was a heal tool. Toxil is not both. Toxil will not be as nearly as good. Alright, I think we'll call it there for this video. I got through 28 cards plus 6, so 34 cards, and judging by this and the previous video, it seems to be about 1 minute per card. At any rate, I'll be hoping to stream this over the next couple of days, but I want to get all of the discussion done first on all of the cards. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a like if you thought this was interesting, and hopefully the minds at Jagex will see this. I really hope that. And I really hope they take on board some of the ideas that stick out that they like. I'm not saying that everything that we've changed should be put in the game, but, like, I think some of it, I'd like to see some of it.